Hello everyone, this is Alkrty here again. Today I will be talking to you about Africa, which is quite our continent, African nation, or I'm going to talk about Africa as a nation or Africa as a continent. Uh, uh, there's two. There are two things I'm going to mention today. The first one is I'm going to give you a fact about Africa, and the second one is going to be challenges that facing African nations. So when I said about fact, I'm going just to give you some briefly fact about Africa. I'm not going to go in depth. I'm not going to talk about the population. I'm not going to talk about how many billion people there in Africa. I'm just going to give you some brief information about Africa. So let's start it. Africa. Fact about Africa. Africa is the largest or the second largest continent in the world after Asia, of course. In both, in terms of area, land, and in terms of population. So the second largest population and largest land in the world is in Africa. Um, and Here, let's talk before we talk about the challenge and the challenge that's facing Africa or African nation. Let's talk about the achievement, the good thing that happened to Africa at the moment. Since the Western, the Western countries, or or since there's many nations in Africa become independent after the colonialism, there is many achievement has happened in Africa, and it is for example, it is an almost entirely Africa has made some achievement. That's you know that doesn't mean that there is some area that we have to work on it, and there is a long way to get there. But the African nation and African leaders are working on that thing, and they are moving forward to be a good nation, to deliver a good quality of life for the people of Africa. Okay, for example, the first achievement that the first one is the education. The fundamentally education in Africa has been improved, and the and through like almost everywhere in Africa, the health and the quality of life for the of the population is improving at the moment, even though there is some people still living in poverty, and there is some people suffering from hunger, and there is many there is infection, but overall there is some improvement, and that's a good thing. And the other thing that I was talking about is the achievement that happened in Africa is the the democrat there is a democratic regime. Most African government right now in West Africa, South Africa, North Africa, um, East Africa, we can see that there is some achievement in terms of governed by democratic regime, which is great. So we need a stable government for African nation everywhere. Even though there is some like civil wars in South Sudan, civil wars in Sudan North, and there's civil wars in Central African Republic. There is civil war in Congo, but people are working very hard, and the African Union are working very hard to to find solution for this problem, and the United Nations works with the African nation to find solution for the problem that facing Africa. The other fact here says since the early 1990s, Sub-Saharan Africa achieved economic growth, and the share of people living in extreme poverty declined, which is great. Growth was not only achieved in few countries, but in many countries. And many countries in Africa has achieved or has achieving right now. The quality of life has been improved in Africa over the last 20 years. Many African countries have achieved sustained economic growth. So, and there is a, in terms of agriculture, in terms of industrialization, growth has been improved in terms of health, education, clean water, sanitation, and all these areas as improving right now. So right now, that's why the child mortality has declined in Africa, because we have clean water, we have good, no, not good or perfect sanitation, but it's improving. And the other fact is since the early 1990s, the share of undernourished undernourished people has declined in many parts of Africa, and that is good news. Fact about Africa: during the last 15 years, the number of people killed by malaria in Africa has been almost half. This is great for the last 15 years. As you know, before that it was an epidemic. Many people has been killed by malaria because the lack of healthcare, because of lack of medicine, because of lack of people don't know how to avoid it, and because of lack of the public servants and all this sort of thing contributed to malaria to kill many people in Africa, especially children. But right now we can see we can see some achievement on the ground. As it says here, the fact during the last 15 years, the number of people killed by malaria in Africa has been almost half, and this information has been taken from the reliable resource such as the United Nations, and there is many specialized agencies, and the African Union, and just like international organization and regional organizations that they have a good research, and they comes with this information. So the other fact is that the young generation in Africa is much better educated right now than ever before, which is great. Right now, you can see the high school in Africa, they're doing real well, and you can see the university, primary school in Africa, they're doing really well in literature and numeracy and literature. So people are doing really well in Africa in terms of education, which is great. We want to see this sort of thing. We don't want to see wars, we don't want to see civil wars, we don't want to see armed conflict between the African nation, but we will be happy to see African nation move forward. Okay, and the other fact that I should give you this fact before: how many countries or how many states in Africa? There are 54 states in Africa right now, and all this being recognized by the African Union, and as well by the United Nations, has recognized 54 state in Africa. I think the last state become a member of the African Union was the um, South Sudan, the last African nation, as far as I know. Okay, challenge. Let's talk about challenge. Challenge that facing African nation. There is many challenges, but as I said, I'm really optimistic, and we will get there one day. So the first challenge was the climate change. This is not just African challenge or African continent challenge. This is global challenge. That's why we have Paris agreement on climate change. There is many largest number. There is many countries. A lot of countries has signed that agreement, and because they realize that the international community has realized that the climate challenge is real. Therefore, they have to deal with it. They have to work very hard to outcome this challenge. Otherwise, if it's too late, it's going to be a disaster, not just for African people, it's going to be a disaster for everyone around the world. Therefore, the international community, the leaders, has to work very hard, even though there is some disappointed nations such as USA. They try to move away from this agreement by the president of United Nations, Trump. He tried to move away from the agreement, and he didn't believe that there is a such there is what they call climate change. Okay, climate change is real, and it has a significant impact to economic, social, and environmental development in Africa. We can see that. We can see there is famine, there is natural disaster. There is many nations in Africa we haven't got any rainfall for a long time, and that affect the agriculture industry. So therefore, climate change is real, and there is a strong evidence that it says that, or warming in Africa has increased significantly over the past 50 to 100 years, with clear effect on the health, livelihood, and food security of Africa, of people in Africa. The other challenge that infection diseases. One of them, it was in the long one, or the traditional one, was the HIV, which has killed many people in Africa, and is still going on, especially in South Africa. But the situation is getting better. Ebola in West Africa on the 23rd of March 2014. There is African regional office reported that the United WHO, that's the World Health Organization Africa Regional Office, has reported that an outbreak of Ebola virus disease in Guinea, in West Africa, and that infection has quickly spread to other countries in West Africa, such as Ghana, Sierra Leone, and the outbreak was really large, and the United Nations has to blame, because their response to the infection wasn't good enough, and as the and as a result of that, it became epidemic in West Africa, has destroyed life, you know, and become and community has devastated of these diseases. Many children, orphan children, become orphan because they lost their parent. It was a disaster. As a result, more than 11,000 people have died of the disease. So the United Nations should and supposed to respond quickly, and these people, they shouldn't die. They shouldn't have died at all. This just show that sometimes the international community, they don't respond as quickly as they should. So right now the infectious disease is over, but we have to learn from the past, and this thing, it shouldn't repeat it again, hopefully. Okay, the other challenge, let's move forward, about corruption. Corruption is become even an epidemic, because corruption is opposite of good governance. Corruption is opposite of sustainable economic growth, peace, stability, peace and security, and development in Africa. If there is corruption, there is no development. If there is corruption, there is no sustainable economic growth. If there is corruption, there is no peace, and there is no a good quality of life for African nation. So African leaders and the non-governmental organization in Africa, or the civil organization in Africa, has to work very hard to fight this epidemic. They have to overcome this epidemic if we want, because it's very important, if we want development in Africa. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard. It shouldn't be there is corruption is a bad thing for Africa. Therefore, we have to fight it. We have to overcome this thing.